friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Jen, and I do cooking, canning, and food preservation videos every week, and sometimes I post vlogs or garden content on Fridays. If that seems like the sort of thing that you'd be into, I hope you'll consider subscribing and sticking around. Today we're going to be making Zuppa Toscana soup. It was very cold, like frigid, the day that I made this, and it was heavily requested by a couple of my children, so I figured, why not go ahead and make it and share it with you guys too. Now, if you're new here, you may not know that I always double my recipes. I have a very large family, so when I list this recipe below in the description box, I will make sure that I do it for a single batch of this soup. So you will see me making far more than you will actually make if you go by the recipe. So I'm going to start off with peeling and washing my potatoes really well, and then I just dice them up into about 1-inch cubes. You can use whatever kind of potatoes you like. I had russets on hand, so that's what I used, but I think any potato would be really good in this. In fact, if you can't have potatoes for whatever reason, I would suggest trying it with turnips or maybe even radishes. It might give it a pink color, but turnips and radishes or cauliflower even are fantastic stand-ins for potatoes. This recipe also calls for kale. You can use whatever kale variety you like. I like curly kale in this soup. It gives it a really nice chew when the soup is finished. But by all means, use whatever you have access to. If you froze kale over the summer, please use that. I would have used that, but I used it all up already, so it was all gone. So I just tore it into like bite-sized pieces. You can chop it if you like, but I just hand tore it. Then I'm going to take about 8 slices of bacon here, or however much bacon you'd like in your soup, and I'm just going to dice it and fry it until it's crispy. Now, I had started cooking this bacon in the oven for another recipe for Thanksgiving, and at the last minute I decided I didn't want to make that, so I just put this in a paper towel and put it in the fridge. So this is not going to take very long for me to cook this since it's almost cooked already. Since this spent a majority of its cooking time in the oven, most of this bacon fat has already been rendered. If you're cooking from raw bacon, you're going to have quite a bit more bacon grease than this. So you might want to go ahead and strain some off to use later for something, or if you don't keep bacon grease, just soak a little bit of it up with a paper towel before you move on to the next step. And once I get all of my bacon out of my big pot here, I'm going to go ahead and add some mild Italian sausage. You can use whatever type of Italian sausage you like. If you can't find Italian sausage or you don't like Italian sausage, just use regular ground pork or even breakfast sausage would work here. I wouldn't suggest one that's flavored with like maple syrup or something like that, but just a regular old sage sausage would be really nice in this. I'm going to just add these 2 packages of sausage here, and I'm going to break them up a little bit, but I'm not going to fiddle with them too much. I want them to get really brown so that it'll add more flavor to my soup. So once I get just these big blocks broke up a little bit, I'm going to walk away and just let it brown on the bottom before I mix it up. I know a lot of folks just scream the praises of these fancy, meat mashers, but if you don't have that kind of coin to spend on a specialty product, I use my potato masher. That's it. I use my potato masher to break up my ground meat when I cook it like this, and it works fantastic. It makes really quick work of ground meat. Sausage, hamburger, turkey, it doesn't matter. It does a great job. So use what you have. Once all of my meat is browned and pretty much cooked through, I'm going to remove that to a paper towel as well. And the main reason for doing this is so that you don't end up with just like a really gross layer of fat floating across the top of your soup. There will be a little bit of fat in this, and that's fine. Fat is flavor, but you just don't want like a really thick layer of sausage fat or bacon fat floating on the top. In fact, the little bit of fat that's left over in this pan, I'm going to use it to kind of pre-cook my onions and my garlic a little bit, and then with what's left, I'm going to add some flour for a tiny bit of thickening. When you say Zuppa Toscana soup, most people think Olive Garden, and Olive Garden's version of this is kind of thick, and that's not what we're doing today. Most people don't know that this is an actual soup from like Tuscany, or the Tuscany area, and it's a pretty watery soup, and they would normally add cannellini beans to this. And I'm gonna try not to butcher the name, but I think it was minestra de pane, which basically just means bread soup, and it would be kale, cream, potatoes, and cannellini beans. So you can make this soup as thick as you like. I just added a little bit of flour because I wanted it to be very brothy. I'm going to add my diced onions in and just kind of stir them around in the remainder of that grease that was there. And you'll see that the grease kind of just disappeared almost as quickly as I put the onions in. And once my onions start to soften a little bit, I'm going to add quite a bit of garlic. This is about 9 or 10 cloves. You'll use about half of that, or honestly, however much fresh garlic you like. This is a very garlic heavy soup. I did turn the heat down a little bit because you can see it starting to scorch on the bottom, which is fine. The broth will take that right up, no problem. So here I added about 1/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour into my onions and garlic. And I'm just going to stir this around for a second, let that raw flavor cook off of the garlic, and then I'm going to start to assemble my soup. The first thing I'm going to do is add my potatoes in, and then I'm going to add some broth. Now the recipe calls for chicken broth, but I had just made some really delicious turkey broth from the leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. And I think that this was better than chicken broth. This turkey broth had so much flavor and it was so dark and rich. It just added like a whole nother layer to the soup of flavor. So I ended up adding 3 quarts. Now remember, I'm doubling this, so you'll need 1.5 to 2 quarts of broth. If you don't have that much, you can use a little bit of water. It's not the end of the world. You just need to make sure that you have enough liquid covering your potatoes for them to cook well. If you did like I did and ended up with a layer of fond in the bottom of your pot, make sure that you're taking some kind of flat tool and scraping that up because that's going to add more flavor to your soup and just like a little bit of richness. So don't leave that behind to just burn to the bottom of your pot. Now, the recipe I'm going to list for you below just calls for Italian seasoning. Now, I really hate giving you guys measurements on seasoning because everybody's taste is different. Some of you folks might be watching this right now just beside yourself that I'm adding so much seasoning to this soup. But, this is a lot of soup. This is a lot of liquid, and I really felt like it needed a decent amount of seasoning. I do not like bland soup. So all I'm going to say to you is either add an Italian seasoning blend, or I added some dried thyme, some dried parsley, some rosemary, some oregano, and some basil. Marjoram would have been really good in this, but I do not have marjoram. I don't really keep marjoram on my spice rack. So season this the way you want it. You're the one that's going to eat it. Only you know what you like. I'm also going to add some red pepper flake to this, and I'm going to salt and pepper this to taste as well. I did add quite a bit of salt. The sausage that I used and the bacon that I used was not like overly salty, and I did not salt my broth when I cooked it and canned it. So, just taste your broth after it's had a chance to cook for a little while and decide whether or not you need to add salt and pepper. Now, I let these simmer on medium heat for about 20 minutes or so. I guess it all just depends on the type of potato you're using and how big you cut the pieces. But you want to let them cook until they're soft but not mushy. You want the potatoes to keep some texture to them when your soup is finished. And be very careful if you're using russets because russets do have a tendency to just kind of fall apart if they're overcooked. And, then you'll just end up with a sausage flavored creamy potato soup. So I turned my heat down a little bit and I'm adding all of my kale to this. The reason I'm adding my kale before my cream is because the kale is quite cold and it's going to bring the soup temperature down from boiling to a temperature that is okay to add the heavy cream. You don't want to overcook your kale. It should still have some good texture to it when you're eating this soup. That's why I said I like this curly kale because it keeps a really nice chewy texture. Now, when I add my heavy cream to this soup, you'll see that I stir as I pour. That will help keep your cream from separating in your soup. Also, not boiling is a big factor in that. But if for some reason your cream does separate, don't panic. It's still edible. It's just going to look funny. That's all. Just stir it up really good before you serve it, and it is still going to taste just as good. This would be a really good time to taste your broth again to make sure it's seasoned the way you want it. See if you need to add anything. And then from here, all I'm going to do is add all of that crispy bacon and that Italian sausage back to my soup broth base. Now, once you get the meat added back, basically this soup is done. You could serve it at that point. What I did was I put a lid on it and I turned it down to very, very low heat. And I let it simmer for about another 10 minutes just so that all of the flavors from the sausage and the bacon could kind of meld with everything else and nothing would, feel kind of left out when you ate the soup. Totally optional is you can also set aside some of that bacon to garnish the top of your soup if you like. I just went ahead and put it all into the soup. And that's it. That is the soup. It only took maybe about 35 minutes to make this soup from start to finish. I mean, once you get everything chopped and prepped, the cooking time goes really quickly. And this is like the most perfect soup for a really cold day. This is like comfort food. This like warms you all the way to your soul. And everybody in my house gobbled it up. They loved it. In fact, it kind of made them sleepy after they ate dinner because it was so warm and rich. So we just had this with some garlic breadsticks. Harkens back to, some Olive Garden there, but it went really well together and we dipped our bread in the soup. Now, if you didn't want to do breadsticks, just some crusty baguette would be fantastic with this as well. But yeah, I really hope that you give this soup a try. If you have never had this soup before and you try it, leave me a comment and let me know what you thought about it. I pretty much think everybody knows about this soup, but if not, you should definitely give it a try. It is a winner in my family's book. Until next time, friends, happy cooking.